Hello, good evening and welcome. You've just entered the arena. I'm Michael Coren, whether you like it or not, and thank you for joining me. Ah, Mr. Ahmadinejad. Look, I can forgive you many things, but those absurd safari jackets, darling, please. Now, he spoke at the end of last week to the United Nations, and the usual crap came from his addled, filth-polluted mouth. Ah, modern Islamic Iran. It's a lovely place. Now, if you doubt me, ask Ezatollah Shabi of the band monthly Iran El-Fada, or Tagir Rahmani of the band weekly Omid Il-Zangan, or Mateza Kazamayan of the band Daily Fath. They were sentenced to a total of 27 years in prison, stripped of their citizens' rights after a secret trial merely for expressing an opinion. Or ask Hoda Sabah, 10 years in prison, or Sadeh Madani, 6 years in prison, or even Reza Alejani, 6 years in prison. Their crime? To write articles that were not to the liking of the Tehran Revolutionary Court. In fact, International Freedom of Expression Exchange, a neutral organization dedicated to defending persecuted journalists around the world, has described Iran as the biggest prison for journalists in the entire Middle East. Closer to home, we could ask the family of, murdered Canadian photojournalist Zara Kazemi that the Iranian regime denied any involvement in this poor woman's death until Hezbollah Tabzadi told journalists via his son of how he was arrested on the same day as Miss Kazemi and incarcerated with her in Iran's infamous and terrifying Evin prison. He heard her cries and screams and moans, until, that is, she was removed from the jail with blood pouring from her face. She was repeatedly raped and then murdered. Now, none of this, however, would come as any surprise to the Iranian demonstrators, students and writers who have been tortured, the Christians who have been persecuted, the members of the Baha'i faith who have been killed, the gay men publicly hanged. As for Jews, well, the Iran government wants to force millions of them out of their homes in Israel, destroy their cities, thinks they're all frauds and liars for making up the Holocaust myth. It's threatened to hang innocent Jewish men and women just because they're Jews. And they also, remember, the Iranian government marched teenagers across minefields in the war against Iraq, cut off the limbs of criminals, they sponsor international terrorism, and they host Holocaust denial conferences. Women are denied basic rights, racist propaganda drips from the state-run media. Iran threatens to nuke a fellow member of the United Nations that has never done any harm to Iran. The police beat political, sexual and religious dissidents to death. But still, we listen to the funny-looking fellow in the bad suit who is clearly trying to hide his homosexuality behind his homophobia and his stupidity behind his hatred. Not only do we listen, but the left in this country, as well as elsewhere, rather adore the little Nazi, don't they? Because Iran opposes the US and the comrades stick together. Anti-poverty activist John Clark, you may know him, he's hardly a conservative. He told me a story once of a leftist conference in Toronto where the Iranian government hosted a stall. A woman ran up to it and began to vandalize it. "Stop! Stop!" shouted the leftists as they pulled her away. Screaming, crying, she shouted at them. She shouted that as a feminist, an ordinary feminist, she had been locked in Iran in a coffin 23 hours a day by those lovely Iranians. Why, she screamed, why were these idiots in Canada supporting them? Well, why indeed? Why indeed?